Okay, now that we have gone through how to log in into your Webull account, and the second video, there we talked about how to order stock and either do options or crypto orders. And in this video, I would like to first share with you the framework that I use. And this framework actually I was inspired by the Quantopian website. In the Quantopian website, they have not only they only have data on minute data of the prices of about all of these stocks that you can find in the U.S. Exchange market, but also some foreign or international stocks. And they also have a framework that allows you to do trading, and it's separated into, for example, the framework will automatically trigger open market, and when the market is open, and during the market open, you will execute your script on a definite minute intervals or certain frequencies, or you can trigger whenever you want during the market when the market is trading or during open market hours. And lastly, it would try to trigger your algorithm around when the market closes. And this framework that I wrote was inspired by the framework that I got from the Quantopian. And the Quantopian actually not only they only had the data, but also taught me a lot about how to structure my own trading algorithm, although I'm putting it on my own machine. And this is the cron job or the cron tab that I put on the Linux machine. Actually, I'm running this on the, as you can see, this is a Raspberry Pi machine, and I'm using Python. And trading will, so for example, as you can see, this is the on the top. There's the minute, hour, day, month, and day of the week intervals, and you can specify what time you want your algorithm to run in. For example, on the left side, you can have the minute interval, and on the right part next to that is the hour, and then month, day of the month, and the day of the week. So because we're using trading days, because the trading days are quite fixed from Mondays to Fridays, so as you can see, these are 1 to 5, and because I'm in the Asian time zone, so sometimes this runs into Saturday, and the trading usually starts around the night time where I am in, the time zone that I'm in. And on the right side, you can see that there is the several different scripts that will be triggered, and I'm using the Python 3.6, but I think Python later versions of Python is already out, so you can I can update my Python as well, but it doesn't make that much changes at the moment. And so first of all, I will run the check when it's about 8 p.m. and then after that, in the check, I will try to run certain checks before the market opens and before I start to collect data, and then try to update the data that I have in my machine. Sometimes there is the market data from the previous day, end of day prices, and sometimes there will be probably option chain data, new option chain data, and or for example during the market. And then the next part would be when the market is actually open. These two executes would be execute when the market is open, and because it runs into Saturday, so it was easier for me to split it into one from Monday to Friday, and then overnight from Tuesday to Saturday. And yes, and the next part is the process. So after when the market is closed, because I put on limit orders, sometimes when the orders are not filled, I'll need to go back to read to check if all of the orders are filled. If they're filled, then we will need to adjust the cash positions and to subtract the cash and add the position. Or if I'm selling, I'll need to add the cash into the cash position and subtract the positions from the stocks position that I'm recording on the Raspberry Pi. And at the end, the summary part will just summarize all of the executions and all the trades that was done during the day, and it will be sent to the email. And if you like, you can also tie it with your, for example, Google spreadsheet. So it could, if with the right OAuth granted, you can write it into the same Google sheet, and you'll be able to read it through easier through like graphs, or plot it on the graph or charts to allow you to monitor the trades without processing it every day. So let's run a little bit into what each of these scripts are running. And so first of all, the check script was run around So I suggest it to be run around before the market opens. So we will try to check if the internet connection is okay. And if it's okay, then we will try to log into the Webull account. And I suggest, for example, since Webull has a get account detail or get account ID, so you could check if the login is successful by getting your account detail. And if the account detail is asserted, then the login is successful. And if not, then you can either let the script notify you via email or any other ways to let them know that it's probably the login has some errors, and you can fix it in time before the market opens. So I suggest this to be run just around when market opens or before market opens. And then the update is about the part where you try to get a lot of data from the previous end of the day prices. I run this at the beginning of the trading rather than at the end of the previous day, because sometimes the data would be corrected, or the data is not immediately filled after the previous day's trading. So by the second day, before the market opened, usually the data will be more complete and more comprehensive, and you could get the most correct data, and you can use that to do some calculations. And sometimes, for example, it's easier if you define a universe of stock. So for example, if your trading algorithm will be picking from the SPY 500 stocks, which is quite plenty to choose from, or you can define your universe of stock as for example, Russell 2000 stocks. And you can also use other universe of stock, as long as you have a trustworthy list. For example, there is a Wikipedia which has updated the SPY 500 lists, and you can always find the most up-to-date tickers. The reason that you need to update this list is because corporate actions sometimes happen, and companies do change their ticker names, or companies get merged, or companies go bankrupt, and those company data needs to be updated from time to time, and probably daily will be more reliant and more consistent. And so you should update your basket of stocks or your universe of stocks to choose from, and then collecting the end of day prices. And if there's some time intensive calculations, and it's recommended to do it before the market open. For example, if you are trying to calculate, for example, which stock to actually trade and which stock to monitor, because if there's a 500 stocks, 2000 stocks, you cannot do that 500 stocks and 2000 stocks and monitor each stock during the stock market opened. So during the stock market trading, you cannot monitor all 2000 stocks. It would take so much time or so much computer power to monitor each stock. So if you have, for example, 500 stocks, I recommend that you run the calculation intensive before the market opens. And if there's 500, you can lower it down to maybe 30, 50 for those stocks to actually be monitored during the market open hours, and you can actively trade those 30, 50 with your algorithm, rather than trying to trade 500 at a time. And I recommend doing that, and that usually, it depends on your algorithm, but it could take up to, for example, 20 minutes to an hour to calculate those. And it's better to do that before the market open, because it takes a lot of time. And so you can run it around 8 a.m. before 9 a.m. and around 9:30 the market will open. And this would be the good time to do these kind of things. And for example, if the 30 stocks or the 50 stocks that you are monitoring changes from day to day, you can then sell the stocks that are out of that 30-50 list, and then buy the stocks that are going into the 30-50 list. So you can actively place the order about during the morning. I think Webull also allows the order to be placed after 8 a.m. So you can do that just before the market opens. So this mainly the update script will be running or updating the ticker information and the end of day prices for power intensive calculations. And around 9:30, when the market is open or market is actively trading, then you can write a small algorithm that does not take that much time. For example, it can take about a minute or two to monitor the 30 or 50 stocks that you're actively monitoring and trying to trade or generate buy and sell signals from their active real-time prices, and generate those buy and sell signals and actively buy into the sell stocks or sell out of your positions, and yes, generate and execute those orders. And remember to during the executions, do remember to update your cash positions and your stock positions. So you need to keep track of the cash and the stock positions, because if you don't keep track, you probably will oversell those stocks, and if you don't keep the cash position, you will overbuy things. So you will need to check the cash balance and the stock positions. And one thing is, for example, if you put the order, it will not necessarily, because if you are putting the limit orders, which I do recommend, limit orders are better because you can control the price that you actually buy and sell the stock at. But if those are limit orders, the orders don't necessarily get filled immediately. Sometimes they could take up to minutes, even hours to get filled. So you can either actively check if your previously ordered stocks are filled or not, or at the end of day you can check those orders at the end of the day and then add back the cash, or maybe subtract the positions afterwards as well. But do remember to keep in track of the cash and the positions so that you don't overbuy and oversell. This is quite important. Whereas for example, sometimes if you actually Webull also allows you to have a margin. So if you buy into the margin or sell into the margin, then you'll be over leveraged on your positions, and actually going out of control is quite scary, especially if you're doing it with real money. So this needs to be taken care of, and I do recommend you probably before after a few days, when you put your algorithm live, you should keep track of your monitor your status of the algorithm running status before you actually let it run. So yes, this is quite important. And actually I have failed to with certain times from the stock actually overbuy and oversell. And yes, this is from my own experience as well. And after the market close, so I think the market closed around 4 p.m. And because sometimes the price will still fluctuate a little bit after 4 p.m. So around 4:30, probably when the stock prices are becoming more stable, then you should check off the orders at the end of the day. As I mentioned before, for example, if the orders are not filled, you should cancel those orders and adjust your cash balance or stock position balance. And if they are filled, probably those cash and the stock positions will be okay. And yes, and this is probably the most important, or else yes, I cannot emphasize more, or else you will overbuy and oversell, and going into the margin is quite a scary thing to do. And after the orders or the things are done, and at the end of the day, probably around 5 p.m., you could do a summary. So for example, you can gather the end of day prices, which are, I recommend to gather those at the second day again. But at the end of the day, for example, you can use the last real-time prices to estimate what the portfolio positions and the portfolio status is at. And for example, you can plus all of your positions and plus your cash to know how well you've done or today. Yes. And then you can notify yourself of the trading executions, positions, and cash either through email. And I also recommend to email is quite reliable, because you can if you don't delete your emails, those data will be stored in your email, and you can always go back for a few days to find out when your algorithm has gone wrong. And you can also, as I mentioned before, you can also use the Google spreadsheet to automatically place the especially the how the portfolio is doing into the Google spreadsheet. And the Google spreadsheet is quite well at plotting the data. And so, for example, you don't even need to go into your email to search for the previous day prices or previous day portfolio position. You can actually use the Google spreadsheet to monitor each day. So that's also quite good. And recently I realized that sometimes, for example, if there's some position mismatch, I don't know why this happens, but it happens not so frequently, but sometimes the positions that I have stored on the Raspberry Pi is a little bit different to what the positions are actually on Webull. And if you could try at the end of the day, you could also try to check if the positions of each stock is the same, to make sure that your data is consistent and correct. and that's also speaking from experience. And yes, and these are I think these are the scripts that I basically use for my algorithm. And yes, you should be running these around these times. And yes, and this is the part about the framework. And this is actually heavily inspired from Quantopian. And I actually quite liked how the Quantopian data could allow you to do simulations of backtesting of your algorithm, and you could backtest, for example, previous year or previous 2 years to see how the algorithm is doing. But as I've recently realized, Quantopian actually has they are not no longer available, I think, since last year. So this is quite sad to see them go. It's so unfortunate. And but um, I'm sharing this algorithm, so you could still use something similar. I think the Quantopian framework still works pretty well, and I think this is pretty nice to have the algorithm getting data and then execute and then processing and then summarize it and notify you. I think this is quite a nice framework, and it's quite a nice thing that I've learned from Quantopian. So yep, please let me know if you have any comments, and yes, I'll continue share how what kind of ideas and what kind of things I got into algo trading. And this is actually an algorithm about the momentum trading. So as I mentioned, how the strategy goes is I was inspired by a dual momentum book. I forgot the name of the book. I'll have a separate video probably around what kind of materials I read and sharing of different idea strategies that I've been inspired by different books. And this is the algorithm that's trying to get the top gainers from the SPY 500. So the basket of stocks that I have in here is actually the SPY 500 stocks, and I will try to monitor from their previous end of day prices of the top 30 performers. And the top 30 performers that are in the SPY 500, I will actively buy into those new 30 and then sell if the 30 previous stocks on the previous day that moves out of the 30 top performers. And during the when they execute, I will try to buy when the 30 performers are at the lower price, and then sell if they are more a little bit more expensive. And yes, this was quite inspired from the book that I've read from the dual momentum. And yes, I will share the trading strategies or the ideas from reading the books in a future session. Thank you. So that's it.